Hello, Jessica.
Hi.
I'm Michelle Khouri. I'm the founder and CEO of Frequency Media, and this is my trusty sidekick. Did you know that you're my sidekick?
Yes, clearly. That's
This
what my
is
business card
Jessica.
says. I'm Jessica Olivier. I am Michelle's sidekick, aka lead content strategist for Frequency Media.
Yes, ma'am. And no better duo to pop on and talk about, the subject of conversation today, the power of podcasting. So this recorded conversation, this video is actually inspired by the blog post that we put up recently, which was an iteration of the report that you and Jill Pashesnik, who is on your content strategy team, put together. And that report was a response to a lot of conversations that we have very frequently with people. Usually, it's someone in a marketing team who has gotten a new mandate to put together a podcast or who understands that they need to put together a podcast, but now they have to sell it to their senior leaders. And their senior leaders are usually thinking of podcasting of 10 years ago, which is that like, don't you need to just like plug in a mic to your computer, or maybe you just open Anchor on your phone and you
So
record quick and dirty, put it out into the world. Hey, you got a podcast. Well, sure.
technically,
Yes, that is a podcast, sure. But is it a good podcast? Is it going to deliver a return on the investment, even if it's a time investment? Because sitting down, taking out your phone, talking, recording, and publishing, putting a cover art together, all of that is time spent. So even if you're doing it quick and dirty, are you getting a return on that time spent? Do you want a return?
absolutely.
So, we put together this document as a framework to help facilitate those conversations, to help inform and guide those conversations. And it also ended up being a treasure trove for us to really better understand how to speak about the power of podcasting, because Frequency was built to work with the power of sound. And there's a reason for that, but now we have the data points. So, Jess, do you want to give us a really quick recap of how you see, how you now communicate about the power of podcasting to potential and current clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was really the catalyst for why this doc, like the original form of this doc, was made. Was going into meetings, and I've coined the term like the podcast advocate. There'd be a podcast advocate within like a marketing team, within like a client's team, and we would look at each other with like an eye of like, so we need to do this, right? And usually the podcast advocate is like, we need to do this, right? But we're both like, how do we message this? How do we share this with the rest of the team that's sitting here today? And so Jill and I just got digging into why, what are the hard facts that support the power of
Mm-hmm.
podcasting? Because we see it all the time. We see the ripples of change it can make. We see the intimacy and trust it can build. We
Mm-hmm.
see the stories from, especially from a brand that it can tell. And, this doc was taking what we know and finding really the data to support it.
Mm-hmm.
And we just nerded out, found some really good studies, and we're really blown away with how supported our hypothesis was that
Yeah.
that sound can be used so powerfully for brands to tell their story.
So powerfully. And, we're not here to regurgitate what's already in that report. And it's actually pretty quick. It's not like a report makes it sound hefty. It's pretty consolidated. And so you can go to frequency.media/blog. And of course, that's the millennial spelling. So FRQNCY.media/blog. But we wanted to drive the point home in this conversation for anybody who is that podcast advocate that, of course, our lead content strategist has created a persona of personas because
Can't be stopped.
but it's perfect, can't stop, won't stop, because there usually is in a team that person who is the podcast listener, who gets the landscape, who loves audio, any one of those things or all three of those things together. And those are the people that we're here to really support and or help to educate those who kind of have an inkling but are not sure if podcasting is the right fit. So fundamentally, as a brand, a podcast is a right fit if you're trying to build authentic, trusting relationships with your target audience, whether that's your customers, your consumers, your users, your viewers. It is a very different vibe to have podcast listeners and to speak to podcast listeners than it is to even have viewers. So even if you are, let's say, Oprah Winfrey, Oprah Winfrey Network is one of the, I laugh because I'm like really trying to manifest this, but Oprah Winfrey Network is one of those that does an exceptional job with viewers. They understand viewership. But now they're extending into audio, and now is an understatement. She's been, Oprah Winfrey has had Super Soul Conversations for a while now, but they're starting to refine it, and you can tell that there's some movement in audio happening, and it's a totally different ballgame. It is a totally different ballgame because your viewers are not they don't have the same relationship with you as your listeners. In the same sense, your most loyal customers, the way that they see you and interact with you via customer support, for instance, very, very different relationship than they're forming with you via a podcast. Even a podcast hosted by the same people. Let's say if you have a customer support podcast, that's interesting. I know, we're like, so the point we're trying to drive home with this video is to think about not the medium as much as the channel, the platform for engagement that podcasting creates. So a lot of people get wrapped up in the logistics, the how behind creating a podcast, when there's companies like Frequency Media who can easily take on the how for you. What we want people to do is get over that first hurdle of why, because there are so many reasons why.
So many reasons why. I mean, for starters, as you were just talking about how special and unique of a medium it is, I remember Jill and I talking about how people don't tune out podcasts. You are so intentional when you listen to a podcast. While sometimes I put TV on, and even though I put it on, I picked the show, my brain's like, okay, I'm going to tune this out and look at Zillow. I'm going to tune this
All the
out and paint my
time.
nails. I'm going to do something because I really don't want to fully engage in this. While it's kind of like the opposite side of the coin in a really weird mirror kind of way, because you
Mm-hmm.
do multitask when you listen to podcasts, but you multitask in a way that helps you engage with it rather than
Yeah.
distract from it. So and that's one of the nerdy data points, was that by multitasking intentionally while listening to a podcast, it actually helps with memory encoding from the messaging in the podcast. So listeners are able to take more in because they're intentionally listening while they multitask versus, multitasking to get away from the all consuming that is sometimes video.
It is all consuming video. Lord knows I love me some Netflix. Thank you, Netflix, for existing. But it is all consuming. It's a very codependent medium, which
Mhm.
means that video and I have to be engaged to actually get the full message, the full story. But Lord knows I'm always like sitting there, acting like I'm relaxing, which is something I'm working on because Netflix is on, but I'm actually working. I'm like laptop on my lap, like doing work. And I actually don't feel like I've missed anything unless there's like a big commotion in the show I'm watching and then I like rewind. Whereas when I'm listening to podcasts, which is a lot, as all of us do on this team, I'm cooking, I'm sitting. I'm actually one of those podcast listeners who really likes to listen to podcasts when I'm sitting in my favorite armchair and just relaxing, and letting the information sink in, because I like to listen to like a lot of like entrepreneur podcasts and things like that, or rich storytelling podcasts. But there are a lot of people who are engaging in multiple activities that don't require brain space. So, will you walk us through some of those multitasking habits?
Oh, yeah. We see that in our research all the time. We see that listeners, they listen while they commute, they listen while they get ready. I mean, like, I am that listener. I have my
Yep.
shower podcasts. Those are the podcasts that I have that are less than 15 minutes because I have 2 kids and nobody has time for a long shower. But then I have my walking, running podcasts. Those are my long
Mhm.
form content. And I'm not alone in that. We see that in the studies all the time in listenership that at the office, at home, in the car, at the gym, exercising, that their podcasts are really this like mobile intimacy that listeners take
Yes.
from place to place and can kind of travel and fit into their life. They don't have to sit down and like carve out an hour for it. They can. And some of them choose to, like you were saying, like favorite armchair, you choose, I'm going to take an hour off and really just like soak into this podcast.
Mm.
But the beauty of the medium is that if you don't have the time for it that day, you can still interact with your favorite podcasts as they weave into your life, which is really
Yes.
different than any other medium. You know, you listen to the radio because you're in the car and you think car radio.
Mhm.
You watch TV because it's after dinner and you're
Mhm.
unwinding. There's these like kind of nooks that mediums get shoved into. And
Mhm.
podcasting has the ability to kind of like flow like water through the day and meet you where you're at. And we see that with listeners all the time.
Beautifully put. Yeah, and I always like to tell people, like marketers in particular, imagine you personally have that time to speak to your audience member. Are you going to choose to do it while they are glancing at their phone on their laptop doing deep work? Or are you going to choose to do that to go to the gym with them? Are you going to choose to take a long car ride with them? Are you going to choose to go on a walk with them? Are you going to choose to just chat while walking through the grocery store? Put yourself in the medium's place, right? And so it's without a doubt, I'm going to choose to go for a walk with them because I want that time. I want that space for us to sink into this together. And here's the thing, here's that double edged sword of intimacy. That intimacy requires care and attention. It requires that you return the favor, return the trust, return the authenticity. So, podcasting is one of those things that if you are in a place as a brand, as a company, where you don't really know who you are yet, or what your culture is, or what your message is, you're probably not ready for a podcast. You got to know yourself, know thyself, and then you can have a podcast.
That's on a shirt. We're printing that, putting it on a shirt. Know thyself on
We
the back.
already have be as big as you are, like it fits. So it really is about you got to know who you are, and it doesn't mean you have to be perfect. We talk to clients sometimes that are going through a lot of internal turmoil or changes, restructurings, or trying to get a hold of their culture. A podcast is a beautiful way to do that if you're going to approach it with truth and authenticity. And Frequency happens to be like the perfect company for you to take on that challenge with, because we have employee communications experience and because we're not going to let you get away with anything that's inauthentic. And sometimes you need those kinds of guardrails. But that's the kind of mindset. It's not, podcasts, oh, everyone has one. First of all, everyone does not have one. We are just starting the boom cycle of podcasting and it's not going to go anywhere. And second of all, even if everyone did have one, everyone has a video. Don't you have something different to say? Don't you have a different story to tell? And if you do, well, the people who you want to talk to deserve to hear that story and you deserve to tell that story. Both sides deserve authenticity and truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners are also great guardrails for that because listeners will be like, oh, I feel like you're trying to sell me something, or I feel like this,
Immediately.
there's a guard up. But the
Mhm.
second that guard comes down and you find that like that human element to any story, a brand story, a thought leader, an expert, if you find the human element, it kind of connects all the listeners together in this listening community. And once you've
Yes.
built that community, it is, I mean, thick as thieves. You don't break a podcast community. There's a
Yeah.
lot of trust and uh, a lot of support received once listeners know that you are coming at this podcast with your human self,
Yes.
human first, whether that's flawed and improving or proud and want to share, no matter where you're at as a brand, podcast listeners are really happy to meet you there if they feel like the message is authentic.
That's exactly right. And that whole growing with you thing is also an important note because you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be trying.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
have to be trying. And in fact, ego gets called out a lot. And when we say called out, we're talking about an audience segment that is incredibly vocal. And so they pop in those reviews and they leave feedback. And when they don't like something, they are super vocal. And when they do love something, they are super vocal. And so it's actually really nice because it is an ongoing conversation, even though sometimes it can feel like you're just talking into a microphone. It's actually quite a conversation.
And it's like a ongoing focus group.
Yeah.
Your listeners will provide feedback and you can really shape, the direction of the podcast based on not only what's going on with the brand, but how are your listeners and your consumers responding to that. These are a type of, this is a segment, this audience likes to help guide the conversation that way.
Yes, they want to be a part of your growth. That's a
Right.
great point. You know, one of the things that I was so surprised at, and it's like a pretty new development in the field, especially, is that Gen Z is starting to really catch on to podcasts. And it's starting to grow. That segment seems to be growing more quickly than I think any of us expected,
Totally.
mainly because we expected them to just be on TikTok 24 hours a day. Oh, she says like loving TikTok.
Oh,
I'm on TikTok. Um, but so, I think the Gen Z part of the equation is only going to hold authenticity to the candle even more. Gen Z is growing up in an era where social equity, social justice, truth, and accountability are at the forefront. And so those are all things that need to go into a podcast because millennials are the biggest audience segment already. And, millennials, we on this call, or on this video, we already value that. But Gen Z, even more so. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Gen Z dynamic?
oh yeah. I mean, with Gen Z, podcasting, I have in my head is like the millennial space. And then there's all these others that are coming in, oh, there's Gen
Yeah,
X
that's
in this
fair.
area. And, oh, we have a Gen Z, how fun. But the studies show Gen Z is coming in and they're coming in
Yep.
strong.
Yep.
And they actually have they have more trust available for their hosts and their
Yeah.
content. So they're investing even more of like themselves than I think millennials even did, which millennials were pretty seriously invested. And with Gen Z, something else that we're seeing is the ethos of Gen Z is making it so that there's some early brand loyalty relationships with Gen Z.
Mm-hmm.
Like they want to know a brand, who they are, what they represent, what's their mission, uh, what are they, what are they here for,
Mm-hmm.
and they will get that brand like loyalty at like 20
Yeah.
and follow that brand because they are invested in that brand's story and mission versus older demographics that will find a product they love and kind of reverse engineer it to find out about the company and then the ethos and the mission. Gen Z is really saying, I like what this company is doing. I like, what they're made of. I like what this could mean for the future for my generation. So I'll find my products there. And that's really one of the beauties of podcasting is it's the medium to tell those stories, to speak of that mission, of that ethos, so that you can let potential consumers and followers hear who you are so they can decide they want to follow your story and be part of
Mm-hmm.
your growth.
And more than ever, companies are being seen as the human beings that make up those companies. It's not just this behemoth logo off in the distance, it is a bunch of people making the thing happen. And
Yeah.
Gen Zers and millennials, and very likely your target audience, no longer sees your brand as just a brand, as just a bunch of colors and ad agency put together. They see the brand as you watching this video and your coworker who isn't watching this video and should, and your boss and your friend and your family that you have to support as you go to work. Like the whole thing. A company is no longer this just abstract thing. And so when you're asking yourself, what is the story behind my company and who are the people behind that story? Do you have an answer? And do you have a direct human centered way that you're telling that story? If the answer is no, or if the answer is hesitant, or if the answer is yes, but I wish it was better, then we are compelling you right now to consider audio and to consider a podcast, because it is that power of podcasting that you can harness to tell that holistic, authentic, compelling, full story.
Yeah. And when you grow that following with that authentic story, you will have the most sincere, loyal tribe of
Yeah.
word of mouth marketers who love to share their favorite podcast with their friends.
And even if you have a misstep with that tribe, you have already established so much trust and so much transparency that you can just be like, hey, we messed up. We need your help to like know how to do this better. They're there for it. So it is a pretty cool system. I mean, it's a cool community that you're building, and you got to put into it, which is why, you know, we're going to have another conversation pretty soon about the importance of having a podcast producer, because it is in that case when you're cultivating that community and you're being so intentional and you're spending that time and you want a return on your investment, whatever return means in this case, you don't want to do it haphazardly. You want a partner on board who's going to know how to do that in just the right way. And so we do have a conversation coming up with Ina Garkusha, our producer, to talk about the power of using a producer and of having a production company, but in particular of having a producer. Because it's not always, the answer doesn't always have to be hire outside of your team. The answer usually is that, because a lot of businesses don't want to create a whole like audio team internally. So that's coming up. But you know, I think that Jess, you did an amazing job of like level setting and bringing the data in that report to life and just like humanizing it, since that's what we're talking about. And I just, you know, we're here. If you have any questions, you can contact us via the website, and you can find out more about the incredible Jess and all of the productions she's worked on via her bio on our About page. And same with me. So hopefully this was enlightening for people. We like to keep them short and distilled. And if you have any questions, please do type those questions below, and we'll have the blog post linked below as well. And if you want to hear us talk about any other categories or any other questions in podcasting, let us know, and maybe we'll be back in front of the cam.
This was so much fun.
Yes. Thank you, as always, Jess. You're so amazing.
You are the captain of this ship.
Let's end awkwardly.
Aye, aye, captain.